Membership is about connecting, and that connecting is what we really want to see happening with our clubs and with our members. And connecting is just so vital. But when it all comes down to it, this is really what membership amounts to. Let me explain why. So here's my story. I moved to a new state, and basically I knew six people. Moved to Pittsburgh, and three people were going to be three of my coworkers, and three people were people who had been part of my interview process, and that was it. So I started on my first day, and on the first day of my job, many of you have heard me say, someone invited me to lunch, which turned out to be being invited to a Rotary meeting. But I was new and I knew no one and thought I need to connect with some people from Pennsylvania. So I said, well, yes, I'll come to lunch. And immediately from that moment, I made connections with people from the community. There were a variety of different people in a variety of different roles. And it wasn't a huge club by any means, but all of a sudden I walked out of a lunch and I now knew 15 people, all from the community where I was working. And the other thing I think as time went on, I attended three meetings because someone had said, well, you can come to three meetings for free. And so I went to three meetings, and then I stopped going to meetings because I had already gone to my three meetings, and I disappeared. I didn't know it. It was before websites, hate to say it, but there was no process for joining the club. And finally, it was 2 months later, I ran into one of those people I met at that first meeting and said, why don't you come anymore? Come to, I said, well, they told me I could come to three meetings. And he said, no, 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 no. You got to come for three free meetings. You can come and pay for spaghetti anytime you want. And let me get you a membership form. And from there, that became my sponsor, and everything was great. So that connection right from the start, that's how I became a member, because somebody and went remembered who I was, and invited me in, went out of their way to do that. That's kind of a familiar picture down there, but it's something I hadn't seen. That's the Northern Lights. It's right out my window, right out here. I was out for a walk one night. We are out in Chaska and live on the Chaska Town course, a golf course on the 15th hole. And so you go out the backyard and you can walk. And after all the golfers go through and it gets dark, if it's a nice moonlit night, you can walk the paths of the golf carts, and it's a great way to walk, and just out in the middle of nowhere. And so I was out for a walk, and I kept looking at the sky, thinking there's something different about that sky tonight. And I walked a little further and went around the bend to a little darker section, and I was like, it's like jumping. What's going on? And I had never seen the Northern Lights. I've been in Minnesota for 25 years. I'd gone out late at night on days when I heard on the news that, oh, the Northern Lights are out tonight, and I never saw them. And so I thought, you know what? Everyone takes pictures. I wonder. And I pulled out my phone and I turned it on, and it's like, whoa, what you can see on your phone that filters out all the noise of the metro area compared to what I could see in the sky was amazing. And so, what did I do? I could have plopped down on the grass in the middle of the golf course and just sat there taking it all in, but I that wasn't my first reaction. what I wanted to do was I wanted to share that with others. So I turned around and I started heading toward home, and I sent a text to my wife and said, "Come outside." And she's like, "What?" I said, "Meet me outside, out behind the house." And so she came out and I said, "Look at the sky." And she's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Here, look at my camera." She said, "Oh, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous." And so by then, a couple of neighbors had caught on. They were sitting out on their deck, and it's like, "Have you noticed what's going on here?" And they came down, and then a couple other neighbors came out, and all of a sudden, we're all out and about, and walked around to the front, and that's a picture of one of our neighbors' homes, and it's like there they are, right here in the city, in the street lights. You could even see them. And what did we do? We connected. We connected around something that we talked to some of our neighbors that in 5 years we had never talked to before. Waved at them when they drove by around the corner, but never had done that. That's the power of membership. We finally felt like, hmm, we're members of this community. A little different than a Rotary membership, but it's what it is. So that's the power of connecting. Here's my question for you. Where were you when you first saw the Northern Lights? And the second question is, who were you with? And I just want to test something here, something phenomenal like an experience like seeing the Northern Lights. And yeah, you might say, "I grew up in Minnesota, so I've seen them all my life," and I'm a little jealous, but maybe that's not you. And maybe you have to say, "I haven't seen them yet," and that's an honest admission as well. So where were you when you saw them, and who were you with? Just want to see if there's a connection between those two questions.
Yeah, Mark, I'll go. Sharif here. Um, a friend of mine, high school friend of mine, came from Bangladesh for a visit, so we went on for a drive. We were going to go to Thunder Bay, and as
Mhm.
I'm going up the shoreline, it was night, and we were in a camp, and this fantastic show really showed up. He had never seen it, I had never seen it, but I knew what it was, and then so yeah, specific things like that. Uh, I really like your question. Who were you with? Because that really stays with you.
Excellent.
This is Kurt. I can go. First time, I think the only time I've seen the Northern Lights, I was in Balsam Lake, Wisconsin, fishing with a buddy of mine, a high school buddy of mine, and we were out on the lake at night, and they took off. It was unbelievable. But very
Okay.
much remember that.
Yeah. Somebody else?
I've never seen them because I can't stay up that late.
Love it. Love it.
Somewhere in the thereabouts Knife River, Two Harbors,
Hmm.
with my wife, seeing
Sure.
them near the shore. So it was real
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating, actually.
So here's the connection about the power of connecting that I want to make is that sometimes when big things happen in our lives, we remember those we're with. That makes a big difference. Experiencing things together is incredible. And perhaps there's some Rotary efforts that you were a part of that were light bulb moments, exciting moments of, "I never knew this. This is great." Maybe you served together on something. Maybe you did something global, part of a project and seeing, look at what happens. And my question is, do you remember who you're with all the time? My hunch is you probably do, because that's the power of connecting. So what I want you to walk away with today is to think of membership in a totally different way, not about being an expert at Rotary, not about being a salesperson to be able to convince someone to join your club. Yes, those things are important. I'm not downplaying that, but I want to get to the root of what membership really is. It's really about connecting. It's about connecting with one other person. And if you can figure out how to connect with one other person, membership becomes something very different in Rotary. It becomes a place of care and shared experiences. And what does that do to you? How does it make you feel? Well, it feels good to experience things with others. If I had gone through that night and just seen it myself, it would have been, I was there, I saw it, it was great. But because I experienced it with others, we now have this connection point that you can't take away from any of us. It was, a gorgeous night in August, and there were the lights, and we did it together. So here's something for us. Rotary is good for your health. Did you know that? Here's your Saturday morning tidbit. Yes, this is proven. A proven scientific verifiable reality. Rotary is good for your health. Well, why am I so bold to say that? Because Rotary is about meaningfully connecting. I think I need a Y in there. What do? We connect with others in meaningful ways. That's part of why we're in Rotary and why we stay in Rotary and why we want to be leaders in Rotary, because we're connecting meaningfully. So we're Minnesota people, so a Mayo study. This was done a couple years ago, and this was a post-pandemic type of research. And what they found was that adults who have meaningful relationships are likely to live longer than your peers, people who have things in common with you who have fewer friends. So the more people you connect with, the longer you live. You enjoy life. It's good for your body to experience life together. I thought, wow, this is great. So what did the study base this on? Here's what it found. These are all things, and there's this friendship was the common denominator in the midst of it. So number one, these are things that increased friendship. If you had friendship, you had meaningful connections. And what were the common denominators for people who had these meaningful connections? Well, here it is: attending community groups or clubs. And what's Rotary? Oh, it's a community service organization. It's a club. It's something that you join. It's that kind of a way. So that's why I'm bold to say Rotary is good for your health, because that's the number one thing that increases friendship is being part of groups and clubs and faith organizations and volunteer organizations, all of that. It's good for you. The second part of what they discovered was those who had deep friendships served together. They volunteered together. They did things together. And that's something. We have service committees. We have service events. We like to do that in Rotary, service above self. And then the third thing was about those who had strong friendships were mentioning how they had accepted an invitation and how they were extending invitations to others to connect. So it's not just being in a community group, but it's those who focus on who else can we connect with? Who else can we bring in? So let me share a very practical story. I grabbed this picture off of the internet, and it looks like it's AI because, a poker hand's 5 cards, so this doesn't really work. But let me tell you about Mark in high school. So my 8th grade graduation night, my sister had her driver's license. She's a little older than me. And so we went and stayed in our 1977 shag carpet. We slept on the floor in our new home because we were moving that summer. And we were moving about 15 minutes away. And uh, it was fun. It was a great memory to go and do that. And so what was unique is I went from my small little class in one town of 19 eighth graders who had been together through the whole all of our years, and then I was going to a high school, a big, huge high school, 800 freshmen, and I knew no one. We were moving into a new subdivision. There were no kids yet in that subdivision. I was alone. So here came the first day of school. I tread off to school. I get my information about bus routes, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to ride the bus. And here we are. I could go down the sidewalk and around all those homes and through the construction mud and get to the bus down there on the street, or I could cut through this field over here. Well, I had my brand new Levi's on, and I think my mother had bought me brand new Converse All-Stars, the old canvas white shoes. And I think that was a bribe for getting me to go to school on the first day because I was kind of scared to go to this big, huge high school. And off I went through this field. Well, it was a dewy morning, and so the high grass was all wet. What happens to brand new Levi's blue jeans, and before they pre-washed blue jeans? Guess what my shoes looked like by the time I got to the bus? I was embarrassed. I just wanted to go home. I was the nerd coming to school with blue Converse All-Stars. That it was a horrible experience. But I hid my shoes under the bus seat in front of me, and off we went. And down around, after about 8 bus stops, finally somebody got on the bus, and he looked at me. His name is Scott Van Buskirk. I still remember him because he was the first inviter for me. He said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Mark." He said, "Oh, I'm Scott." And he sat down in the seat behind me. Perfect. I knew someone going into school. I said, "Are you like a freshman?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a freshman." I said, I'm new. I don't know anybody." "Okay, well, I'll introduce you to people." So there we were. All right. So fast forward, got through my first classes, off to lunch. And Scott sees me coming walking in. I mean, so remember, my little tiny school with 19 eighth graders going to 800 freshmen alone in a 4-year high school. The cafeteria was like as big as the mall, and so I walked in. It's like, oh yeah, what do I do? How do I do this? And Scott was like, "Hey, Mark, and come on over here." And so I went, and he sat down, introduced me to a few people, and he said, "Oh, you know what we do at lunch?" It's like, "No, what?" He said, "We play cards. You ever played poker?" It's like, "Yeah." And so he said, "Good. And you want in?" And it's like, "Yeah." And so they handed things out, and I got my hand, and they're like, "Okay, yeah, who's in?" And I had always played poker with like nickels and dimes, but this was the big leagues. We were now in high school. It was $1 to get in. And I reached in my pocket and I had $1 bill and I pulled it out. And, this was about the hand that I had, a 2, a 3, and a 4, and a 6, there was nothing to it. And I lost. And it was done. Threw my cards in the middle of the table and said, "I'm out." And got home that day, and my mom said, "How was your day, Mark?" And I said, like, "Yeah, look at my shoes. That kind of tells you how my day was." And, "Well, did you meet people?" "Yeah, I met people." And then she said, "So, they have hot lunches every day. How was that?" "I don't know." "Why not?" "I didn't have any money." "I gave you $1 bill when you went off to school. What happened to your dollar?" "I played cards." So I went home my first day of school, not having had lunch because I gambled my lunch away. And anyway, that was my first day's experience. It got better as the week went on. Um, you might recognize this album depending on your music genre preferences, but I went to math class, algebra, and young guy named Paul Chuma was there in class, and he sat behind me every day, and finally by Thursday he said, "Hey, you like music?" I was like, "Yeah, I like music." He said, "I got a new Journey album, and this summer I got a new stereo with my lawn mowing money." And he's like, "It's a Marantz." And I was like, "Ooh, that's cool." And so he's like, "You want to come over and listen?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And I said, "But how do I get there?" He said, "Oh, that's no big deal. You can ride the bus, and then when my dad gets home, he can drive you home." So, okay, because he was complete opposite direction of my house. And so I went and we listened to music, and it was awesome. It was great. Paul became one of my real good friends. He was at my wedding. He ended up working in my family business. My mother liked him more than I did because I always had excuses for why I didn't show up to work, and Paul always came to work. So he became the favorite of the family. But it was a connection that came from one invitation. Do you want to listen to music? And it changed my whole trajectory of my high school years having that friend. So that's the power of connecting. And I'm curious what kind of power has been going on in your club when it comes to inviting and accepting invitations in. So, real briefly here, who invited you to Rotary? Who was that person? What stands out for you about that person? Ready, go. Who wants to share? Who invited you?
I can go. This Kurt, fellow coworker that was a Rotarian.
So, what was the ask? What did?
I actually asked him. I knew he was in
Ah,
Rotary. I was curious as to what Rotary
good.
was, and wanted to learn more about it. Was interested in getting into a service club, and so he invited me to. I asked him about it, and he invited me to join him.
Excellent. Good. Somebody else?
Yeah, Mark, I'll go. For me, it was quite interesting. I had taken early retirement, and I wanted to do something in the community payback. So I sent an email to our mayor, and I said, "Hey, I'm really available. If there's anything I can do within the city or in what, let me know." And the next thing I know, she invites me to come and speak to the Rotary Club. And I asked her about what, and she said, "Just about your life here since you came over." So I did that. And then the police chief followed up and became my sponsor. So yeah.
Hmm. Great connection there with the police chief. Yeah. Somebody else? What was your first experience with Rotary? Who invited you?
I
A
can
member
go.
of a monthly group that got together for breakfast, and there were a couple of members of the Rotary that also were gender, and they said, "Hey, come on over and join our meeting." And so I thought, well, okay, fine. And it was a great group of people and decided to join.
Yeah. G Ray, where are you going?
Yeah, for me, it was many years back. I was invited to a Rotary meeting when at my school we had a couple of exchange students that came from France, a few were from Germany, back in South Africa. So when they showed up, they wanted the Rotarian who was a staff member of the school wanted to those new exchange students from out of the country to be connected with a very outgoing guy at the school. So I was the guinea
Excellent.
pig. So they
Yeah.
invited me
Yeah.
to say, come to Rotary and meet the exchange students that are coming that you're going to be showing around and hanging out with. So I went to the Rotary for them. and it seems like I'm still going to Rotary.
Yeah. Fun, fun. Yeah, yeah. Maria, you're unmuted. Do you remember your invitation?
Well, actually, my husband invited me because he had been in the club for 20 years. But really, I had wanted to join when I had met a bunch of the women from the club on a boat ride with, and they were so kind and so nice. So when the time was right, I joined. I'd just like to add one other thing here.
Hmm.
You know, one of the things that I'm learning is that it's great when someone brings someone in, but then they go into this pool and their head is spinning. The thing that I'm trying to focus on is member success, and that's very personal.
Yeah.
We have to find a way that each new person connects in a way that's meaningful for them and actually make sure that that connection to the club really happens, that they don't spend a year in this morass where their head is spinning. And we lose a ton of people when they haven't found a way to connect. They haven't made another new best friend. They haven't been asked to do something meaningful for them purposely. Our club just has not done a great job at that. And I'm finding this year when we really focus on that, it helps a lot. So I'm just sidetracking a bit.
No, that is great. You're setting everything up powerfully with a personal example. That's great.
Yeah. Can I add to Maria's comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw Maria, that's so true. We saw more and more members that typically don't show up when there's a task for them to do. When they get assigned something, we said today you're gonna be the greeter. Today you're gonna be representing the speaker. Today, when there's a task for them to do, they often show up. And we typically did the Rotary Y. So when it was their turn to do a Rotary Y, they show up. So it was
That's
kind of,
awesome.
to your point,
Yeah.
the meaningful task.
Well, to bridge on this connecting idea here is, first the question was who invited you to Rotary, but then the thing I want you to think about is who needs to be invited, who is around you that you could be that person that says, "Hey, you want to come over and listen to my new album with me?" And then another similar question that goes along with what Maria was saying is who needs to be re-invited, who needs to be reconnected. And I loved your introductions today where in our first questions where you were talking about that connection with others, that people had come along and were part of things and kind of got reinvested all over again. So here's the meaningful connections. Again, attending groups and clubs and volunteering and extending and accepting invitations. But what really jumped out at me when I was looking at that study is what didn't affect connecting that I figured would be there, especially in a post-pandemic type of research. Social media. Very rarely does someone say, all my friends are electronic. No, if you're going to ask someone about their meaningful connections, they're generally in person or more personal than simply responding to tweets and LinkedIn and Facebook kinds of connections. I learned this in a personal way with the family. So here's a little fun Christmas. Those are my antlers because I'm a reindeer there. If you're wondering what's going on, my wife is there, and there are two of our middle grandchildren. There's Avery with her tongue out. She's kind of the out there, personal, talk to anybody kind of a person. And then there's her little sister down in the front, whose name is Sophie. And about a month ago or so, we got an invitation that was pretty simple. Hey, we're having breakfast for dinner. And it's like, breakfast for dinner. I don't know what it was. And I grew up in a family where we were a cereal family. So big breakfasts were never a part of it. So if we ate breakfast, it was later in the day. And I kind of followed that tradition, and my kids know that. And so, like, so if you come over, we're, you know, probably 15 minutes away from those grandkids, and mom said if you come, you know, and get here in 20 minutes, it'll still be hot. It's like, okay, and off we went. And I looked and I thought, okay, let's go quickly. I love spontaneous stuff, and I grabbed my iPad and thought, good, I've been wanting to go through all the grandchildren pictures and organize them, and I'll do that, and the kids will be with me. And then I looked and thought, uh-uh. Why is my grandchildren time so often with me on my phone or on my iPad? And I left it behind and thought, we're only going to be there. It's almost their bedtime. There's not much time left. So I left without my tablet. I purposely left my phone in my pocket when I took my coat off at the door. And I went in and I was fully engaged, and we had a blast. And I connected with those two kids like I had never connected before. I mean, they were climbing on top of me. I was buried under pillows on the couch. It was just this phenomenal time. I'm not telling you anything you don't realize, but then here's what happened. I was getting ready to leave, and I said to little Sophie, you know, she goes to school at the church where I work. And so the preschool is there, and she always comes in behind her sister and hides from me and goes down the stairs to her classroom. And, you know, I'm like the stranger to her. She doesn't look at me. I don't get hugs. She doesn't do anything. And I said, so are you going to smile at me this week when you see me before school? And she just kind of looked at me with no expression on her face, but I could see her wheels were turning. And so, sure enough, the next day, Monday morning, she came walking in, and big sister is there, and she shows me her lunch box. I said, "What's in there?" And she explained what her lunch was. And little Sophie is behind her sister, kind of hanging behind her, hiding like normal. And then all of a sudden, she stuck her head around and flashed that smile like on that picture. It came from connecting. And from that moment, and I said, "Where are you going?" And she stopped and she came out and she told me, she used words with me even. And then she ran over to me and gave me a hug and then went down the stairs. And I mean, it made my day. It made my week. It was like, oh, a new connect. And what's the common denominator to what happened? I engaged, I connected, I did that. There are people in your club who are waiting for a connection. Here's the reality of what happens. The average American spends 4 hours and 47 minutes a day on their smartphone. You can't lie about this because there was an app that was given to people who agreed to be part of that research. And anytime their screen was on, it was recording that they were doing something. 4 hours, 47 minutes. What happens if you would just take 47 minutes of the time that you spend on your devices every day and put that into connecting, and maybe even connecting with people in your club? Here's what they found. People smile less when you're on the phone. And if you smile less, you're perceived as being unfriendly. If you smile less, you're perceived as being a person who's too busy to have time for other people around them. And so you connect less. And the other thing is your interactions are less enjoyable and less meaningful. I mean, let's go back to that high school again. My 40th anniversary, I thought, Facebook's going to change the world. And so, you know, I'd seen people and they came walking into the room, and it's like, you're nothing like your Facebook picture. You know, yeah, what's going on? You know, all that stuff that you were talking, you're still the same jerk that you were when we were 16 years old. You know, it meant nothing. Those interactions meant nothing. but just being there in the room, connecting with people again. And we get to do that on a weekly basis, some of our clubs, or at least a monthly basis or a couple times a month. Make the most of those connected types of moments. This is Bunnies. You might be familiar with Bunnies. So in St. Louis Park, it's just this little gathering spot. And when I was in the Dining Morningside Club, I got invited there by Steve May one morning. And he said, "Hey, we're going to Bunnies. It's the beginning of the summer. We have this gathering at Bunnies. You want to come and be part of it?" I was like, "Oh, sure, why not? Where's Bunnies?" And he explained it. And so I went in there and there were, I don't know, maybe 7 of us around a big booth, and we were just sitting there talking and laughing and talking about all the fact that we're all the non-cabin people, because all the cabin people have already gone off on Memorial Day to their cabins. So here we are, let's make the best of it. And we toasted each other and we had fun, and it was a great experience. And then Steve looked around the table and he said, "You know what?" He said, "All my best friends are in Rotary." And then he just stopped and we kind of looked at each other, and Sue said, "You know, Steve, you're right. Those are my lasting, connecting kinds of relationships. They're the people I've done projects with." And then Dave said, "I'd have to say the same thing. You know, I'm one of the originals in this club, and my Rotary connections are my best friends." And thought, wow, what an impact that is. And that's why, thinking about that first slide, I say membership is about connecting. But when there's not connecting, there's probably not going to be much membership going on. What's the power of connecting? So Rotary International does a survey every year as you get into more leadership roles at any level in the club, but definitely as president, you'll be invited to be part of their annual survey. It's helpful, it's useful information. You'll get the report after it's done. Do it. But here's the thing from a year ago, that what was found. 84% of those who responded, the number one response, said that they were satisfied with their ability to connect with friends through Rotary. 84%. You don't get 84% commonality with people in anything. You know, there's always half the people who appreciate something and half the people who look at something and say, it wasn't that great. You know, that, but 84 said, no, Rotary is great because I connect with friends. That got my attention. The other thing is this: 45%, when asked, why do you stay in Rotary? The number one answer was friendship. I stay in Rotary because of friendship. Serving, yeah, we're a service organization. It was 44%. So even higher than serving in a service club was the idea of friendship. So are you a recognized friend? Would people in your club assume, you know, would they list you among their friends? What about the person who's kind of fallen through the cracks that you don't see that much anymore? What if you reached out to them and said, "I miss you. I enjoyed being at meetings with you. Why don't you come back?" We all know what it feels like to be in a room of strangers. We come walking in, and I told my cafeteria story. I just wanted to connect with that, but that happens all the time. I mean, I was down at Mystic Lake for a 5960, the other district of the Twin Cities. They had their district conference, and I went to that. And I'm looking around the room, and all of a sudden I found a familiar face. And what did I do? I walked all the way across that ballroom, and I went and talked to that person that I recognized. That's the power of connecting, because now I had this. And then they helped me connect with other people in the room. And all of a sudden, I had commonalities, and I felt so much better and so much more comfortable that when I finally went through the breakfast buffet and sat down at a table, I went to a bunch of people I didn't know because I had connected with someone that I felt comfortable with. And then I thought, I want to make sure other people in this room are feeling comfortable too. And we were a bunch of people who didn't know each other. We had just been invited to come to this event, and we came. So the power of connecting. This is a little boy. They tell us statistically that between 6 months of age and 1 year of age, a child will light up in a group of people when they see someone they recognize, someone that they have a connection to. And I mean, just look at that little guy's face. It's like, look, he's watching who's coming in the room. That's what happens at every Rotary meeting. There's someone in that room who lights up when you come walking in the room because you have a connection to them. So you've got a powerful role. So Rotary membership is about connecting. Here's a few things about Rotary. Rotary gains 44,000 new members a year. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? 44,000 people around the globe. Here's the bad news. Rotary loses 51,000 members a year. Not incredibly sustainable in that way as we look at it. Here's another sad bit of news. 50% of new members leave in the first year. Yes, that is true of your club as well. Why? They don't get connected. They don't feel it. They for whatever reason, it just didn't happen for them. They lost sight of, why would we give up time to do this? Why would I pay to be a part of this? Why am I leaving work where I have a big project to do to go to some meeting? 50% leave the first year. And what are the 2 months we lose the most members? Pretty clear. It's dues months. So every club pays dues to the district and to Rotary International twice a year, in January and in July. So the 2 months that are the largest losses of members are December and June. And you know why that is? Because we look at our people in our club and we say, who hasn't been here? I'm curious if they really want to come. And when we ask that question of notice you haven't been coming to meetings and you haven't paid your dues for a year, do you still want to be in the club? And guess what? Usually the answer is, no, I have this going on. I have this commitment. I have this is too big in my life. No, you can go ahead and take me off the membership rolls. Huh. Isn't that sad? But what would happen if in May, you coming in as the presidents would take a look at the club roster and because you have now have access to that, and you would look and say, who haven't I seen for a while? And you would reach out to that person in May and say, hey, let me tell you who the speaker is at the next meeting. It's going to be great. Or did you know we're doing this summer? You want to sign up and be part of it with me? What would happen if that happened? Because the treasurer is still going to contact that person and say, hey, you haven't paid your dues. Do you want to be a part of the club? But if you get to them first and they know, oh, I'm valued, I've been remembered, somebody wants to be my friend, guess what's going to happen? They're going to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't gotten around to paying. I'll get it out this weekend. I'll get my payment in. And you've retained that membership just because you connected with them. If you want to have a powerful year as a president, don't spend all your time with your board. That's important. You need to spend a lot of time with your board, but make sure you carve out time to look and connect with the people who might not be super active and the people who might not be around. Pay attention to those newer people. Have they connected in? Are they participating? Take the 47 minutes. You can still spend 4 hours on your electronic gadgets, but give 47 minutes to connecting with people here at Rotary and in other places in your life, and your life's going to be just amazing. You will start to see in that way new growth because you'll start looking and connecting with people, and that will remind you of other people that, oh, I know somebody else who's in the flooring business. Maybe I'll reach out to them and invite them. But also retention. If we can get retention down, if we can keep December and June from being our huge loss months, it will really be something, and your club will be so much better for it. Yeah. All right. So just to kind of wrap up here, tell me what you see. What's going on here in this picture? No right or wrong answers. Just what do you see?
Conversation.
Engaged.
Okay.
One person is not connected. She's looking at her phone.
Huh. I didn't even notice that when I grabbed this picture last night. That's great.
I was on that event. I was probably around somewhere.
Yeah, there's a couple outliers outside the group. Yeah. Anybody else see anything there?
They seem happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
As a gray-haired person, I look at that group and think, oh, here's some young energy. I'm curious. And the other thing I see when I look at this is right from this view, guess what? There's room for one more person. Selfishly, I think I could go there, but the more I'm in Rotary, and having been membership and public image and president and all those kinds of things, and club admin and the person who went after people who didn't pay their dues, after all of that, what I would think is I'm going to go over to that guy in the white shirt over to the left who doesn't really seem all that happy, and I'm going to say, hey, come on over here. Let me, guys, introduce yourself to him. He's here. He's newer in our club, and fill that little spot there with a new way to connect. So that's kind of the heart of it all. I just want you to think about membership not as a statistic, not as a number that people are going to look and judge you on and your effectiveness as a president. Yeah, I hope you'll have membership goals that are lofty and bold. I hope you get to those, but what I want to say, before you enter your year is just connect with people, and amazing things will happen in your club. No doubt about it. So what do you hear? What has been going on in your brain as I've been telling you these stories today?
I've been thinking about opportunities to connect with some of the members that I haven't connected with in my club.
Good.
I think for me, everything that you talked about, Mark, needs to be intentional. So I got to step back and think about it and put it into action.
Yeah.
I think there's two aspects. Is one, as you're pointing out, that retention is almost as important as recruiting. And second of all, is that, don't necessarily look at, just make the connections. Hopefully, new members will follow from just those connections.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal for you as a president to be out there, be bold, be inviting people, but you're one person. If you can get 5 people who are kind of fringe members right now, engaged and super excited about it, and they start inviting people, you've now exponentially grown the potential of membership in your club just because you connected with a few of the members that you're not really seeing super engaged. Yeah. So there's your challenge. Go connect. I'll tell you, leave this thing behind sometimes, see what it does. Test me, see if that theory is true, and you might be surprised. Well, thanks for spending some of your Saturday morning with me, and go dig out your membership list. There's a name on there who needs to hear from you this week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.